It was a warm Wednesday morning at Crescent Hill Elementary School, a small public school tucked away in the suburbs of Seattle. The walls were decorated with paper planets and crayon-drawn astronauts. It was career week. Excitement buzzed in the air as students waited eagerly for their turn to speak. Parents had been invited to talk about their jobs, and kids were proud to share stories, some real, some exaggerated. In the middle row sat Ava Collins, a quiet, thoughtful girl with big eyes and a notebook covered in space stickers. When her turn came, she stood up slowly, heart pounding. "My dad," she said, voice barely above a whisper, "works at NASA." For a brief second, the room froze. Then, a burst of laughter filled the space. One student whispered, "She just wants attention." A few others chuckled. Even Mrs. Randall, the teacher, gave a tight, doubtful smile. That moment, just 5 seconds long, was all it took to make Ava feel smaller than ever. The truth, it seemed, was too big for this classroom. Ava lowered her eyes as the laughter faded, but the sting remained. She didn't cry. She didn't argue. She just quietly returned to her seat and forced a weak smile, the kind that only hides the storm brewing inside. Beneath her desk, she clutched the edges of her worn-out spiral notebook, its cover bent, its pages filled with rocket sketches, satellite doodles, and notes she had carefully prepared the night before. She had written down exactly what she wanted to say about her dad, how he worked on communication systems, how he once showed her a real satellite blueprint. But now, none of that seemed to matter. That notebook, once a badge of pride, now felt like a weight in her hands. As the next student stood up to speak, Ava stayed still, staring at her folded hands. Inside, her excitement had collapsed into something much quieter, like a dream slowly sinking beneath the surface, out of reach. Down the hall, in the quiet hum of the teacher's lounge, the day's moments turned into murmurs over coffee and half-eaten sandwiches. Mrs. Randall chuckled as she recounted Ava's claim. "She said her dad works at NASA," she told another teacher, raising an eyebrow with disbelief. The others joined in, light-hearted but cutting. "NASA?" From this neighborhood, one of them said with a laugh. She probably meant he watches NASA on TV. A few snickers followed. To them, it was just another silly story from a kid trying to feel special. Another childish fantasy born from cartoons and dreams too big for the zip code they lived in. No one considered it could be true. No one paused to ask. And just like that, Ava's truth became the subject of an adult joke, a punchline that would never reach her ears, but would echo loudly in the way they'd look at her from now on. Just a few blocks from the school, tucked behind a modest 2-bedroom house, was a garage that didn't look like much from the outside. Its paint chipped, a rusty toolbox near the door. But inside, it was a different world. A quiet hum filled the space as David Collins, Ava's father, leaned over a workbench covered in wires, blueprints, and custom-engineered circuits. His hands moved with calm precision, adjusting a satellite relay component he was assembling for a subcontracted NASA project. There were no plaques on the wall, no media coverage, no one cheering him on. Just shelves full of binders, a flickering desk lamp, and the constant quiet pulse of a man deeply in love with his work. While the world overlooked him, he was helping build the systems that kept deep space communication alive. He didn't crave the spotlight. He preferred the silence, the kind where real things were built. And while he rarely spoke of it, Ava knew what that badge meant. She'd seen the NASA seal tucked inside his top drawer. She knew the truth, even if no one else did. The following Monday, the school sent out a cheerful announcement. As part of Career Week, there would be a special live Zoom session with a guest speaker from NASA headquarters. The moment Mrs. Randall read it aloud, the room lit up with excitement. But in the middle of a chatter, a single hand rose quietly. Ava's. "I'd like to introduce them," she said, her voice calm but clear. The room paused. A few students exchanged smirks. One boy whispered, "Here we go again." Even the principal, standing in the doorway, tilted her head slightly in surprise. Mrs. Randall hesitated. "Are you sure, Ava?" she asked, her tone cautious. But Ava didn't blink. She simply nodded and said, "I know someone there." There was more laughter, but Ava didn't flinch this time. The truth was still hers, even if no one believed it. And somewhere deep inside her, she knew the moment to prove it was coming. Not with speeches, not with drawings, but with something real. Something that couldn't be laughed away. The classroom buzzed with anticipation as the projector screen lit up and the NASA guest speaker's Zoom call began connecting. Chairs squeaked, whispers filled the air. Ava sat at the edge of her seat, fingers clenched tightly in her lap. Just as Mrs. Randall moved to the front to introduce the speaker herself, the classroom door creaked open. Every head turned. Standing there was David Collins, dressed neatly in a navy blue blazer, with his ID badge clipped just below his chest, bold letters spelling NASA contractor. But he wasn't alone. From the speakers, a voice rang out, clear and commanding, from the man on the Zoom call. "Ah, there he is. This man's innovation shortened our Mars relay lag by 27%. We owe him more than one patent." The room froze. Not with confusion, with realization. The same Ava who had been laughed at days ago had spoken the truth. The air shifted instantly. Every whisper died. Every doubt dissolved. Ava didn't smile, not yet. She just looked forward, quiet and steady, as her world finally aligned with the truth she never stopped believing in. For a long second, no one spoke. Even Mrs. Randall, always quick with words, stood frozen, her mouth slightly open, eyes wide with disbelief. The classroom, once filled with giggles and side comments, now held a silence, so heavy it almost echoed. Then a single hand went up. "Mr. Collins, do you sign autographs?" a boy asked, half joking, half serious. Laughter bubbled up, not the mocking kind, but genuine amusement, tinged with awe. Another student leaned in and whispered, "That's so cool," while a few others began clapping, hesitant at first, then louder. The applause swept across the room. But Ava didn't turn to look for reactions. She didn't puff her chest or blink back tears. She simply sat quietly in her chair, her hands resting on her notebook, and let the moment breathe. No pride, no need to gloat, just the calm satisfaction of being seen for the first time, not because she shouted the truth, but because it finally walked in and stood tall beside her. That evening, the house was quiet except for the soft hum of the kitchen clock. Ava sat at the table, her spaced notebook open once again, but this time not to erase or hide anything. Her dad, still in his blazer, warmed up dinner in the microwave and sat down across from her, sipping from a mug that read "Space People Don't Sleep." For a while, neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. Then, in that calm, fatherly voice, David looked at her and said, "You never needed them to believe you, Ava. You just needed to believe yourself long enough for the truth to catch up." She looked up, her eyes soft, her heart finally still. Then, without a word, she picked up her pencil and turned to a fresh page. At the top, she wrote in bold, careful letters, "My dream, to work at NASA, not just tell people about it." The laughter from earlier was a distant memory now, replaced by something far more permanent. Belief. Not in who her father was, but in who she could become.